Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football YouTube channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined in red by my man Anwar Richardson. He's got the Buc-ee's t-shirt on. I've got the Philadelphia Phillies t-shirt on.
Nice.
And we're ready to talk. We did not plan this. This is not us getting ready to do, like, I don't know, a hopscotch competition together. Or
music group.
Yes. Oh, that would a boy band. We're not doing that. But we're going to be here to talk some Texas football. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed and you kind of dig the video, we will be doing videos just like this one, discussions about Texas football recruiting every day, basically. So hit that subscribe button. Anwar, the topic at hand today is, and if you haven't listened to the Orange Bloods podcast, the Modcast podcast that we do, go check out either the link on orangebloods.com, go to theyak.com, and or just go find us on social media. We've got it linked out there on Twitter, Facebook, you name it. We talked about early enrollee versus guys that just arrived. Not really like a comparison, but looking at the players that just arrived on June 1st, starting to move in, starting to be involved in football activities with this coaching staff, their teammates. There's a good conversation to be had about who from this list of guys that just arrived this week has a chance to make a big impact on the field for this team in 2021, because it is one of the kind of elephants in the room with regards to the Texas spring game, is that what we saw on the field in that game didn't include the entire team. I mean, there's no DeMarvion Overshown. There were a number of guys that didn't play that were coming off of injuries, but there is a list of guys that show up this week that I think have a chance to elevate this team on both sides of the ball. And I think it's probably a conversation we don't have enough, because those guys haven't been on campus. And now that they are, it's a lot easier to start talking about where they fit into the conjunction of this team immediately, not long-term, but who comes in and can help this team get over a bar of expectations that will not be low for this season.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we did this in the Modcast not too long ago. So I've actually helped that. I feel like I'm a little bit better prepared for the question and the conversation, because I was thinking strictly freshmen, and I forgot honestly about they've also have some transfers that are coming in as well that could come there and help them. So it's interesting when I start thinking about, okay, well, which guys can have like the most immediate impact? Like, so on our Modcast, it's a podcast and we're all mods, so we call it the Modcast, right? Moderators, podcast, whatever. Cover play on words. The guy that Alex took, I will lead off with, Catch, which is Devin Richardson.
Well, hold that thought, because I want to go from front to back on offense to defense.
Okay.
So I wanted to start on the offensive. We can start on defense, but I've got like an order of the mayhem that I would like for us to follow. So can you hold the Devin Richardson thought? Sure,
I can hold it. It won't go anywhere because he's got the same last name, so you already know what I'm going to say about him.
Yeah,
it's going to be glowing.
That's your play cousin.
Yeah.
All right. So look, there aren't any quarterbacks to discuss, so we can skip right past that. There's nobody at that position moving in. At the running back position, Jonathan Brooks is an interesting guy for me, from Hallettsville, 4-star recruit from Rivals. Jason Sukamel in the Modcast, I feel like we're now referencing, we're like, it feels like a scene out of the Avengers. There's like parallel universes and stuff going on. But in a conversation that we had with our Orange Bloods guys earlier today, Brooks is a guy, and he wrote about this earlier in the week. He thinks that Brooks is going to, based on conversations that he's had with people in the program, that Brooks has a chance to be an early impact guy. I have to be honest, I don't know if I completely see that.
It's interesting with Brooks, because he was productive in high school. We don't necessarily guard him on the quote unquote elite level, even though he had a 5.8 ranking Catch, on Rivals. But when we start talking about like impact, and that's what Jason's talking, he's talking about an impact guy. I mean, we're starting with Bijan, and I mean, we're still waiting for Bijan to have that impact. And listen, I'm not discrediting Bijan in any sense of the word. What I'm saying when I still talk about waiting for him to have that impact is we're judging Bijan Robinson. I've said this before, off of a 3-game sample size. 3 out of the last 4 games, he did, incredibly well. 2 games, he obviously the last 2 games were bona fide, but we're still trying to see what Bijan can do over a 12-game season when he has that workload. And then after him, I mean, I'm still high on Roschon Johnson. Like, I'm not going to sell on Roschon. Roschon's a guy who's come in, who's had an impact, who is transitioned from quarterback to running back catch. And he's been good. He's been solid for what you want in that position. He's a guy that I look at and I say he's a guy that an NFL team, he's going to get at the very least an invite, if not potentially a late round pick. He's definitely going to get an invite at some point, I believe. And so after that, to me, it's just a bunch of people kind of scrambling for what's left, whether that's Gabriel Watson, whether that's Daniel Young, then maybe that's Jonathan Brooks. Whatever the case may be, I see 2 guys and I see everybody else scrambling for what's left. So it's not to say anything disparaging about Jonathan Brooks. If he was coming in and all of a sudden he's like a high 5-star and you're saying, man, this is going to be bam, bam. But right now, Catch, I'm on Bijan, I'm on Roschon, and those are kind of like my 2 guys going into the, like the off season, the season, whatever what have you.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that Brooks will have his hands full to get to the front of the line with Gabriel Watson and Daniel Young. I think he can do it, but that's his first challenge. I think Gabriel Watson ended up having a good spring. I think the coaches like him. So I don't think it's not a referendum on the number 3 running back spot that he has to come in and fill that void because they're unhappy with what they have. I think, and then I wonder if Brooks actually brings a skill set that is different enough from the other guys that would warrant moving him up. I think we're going to talk about a guy like that in a second at the wide receiver position that does that. I don't know that Brooks does that. If he is an impact guy in year 1, to me, that means that Bijan Robinson got hurt and or Roschon got hurt. One of those 2 guys needing to fill the void. And look, if a Bijan Robinson injury occurred, at that point, I think Jonathan Brooks potentially has a big role on this team because you and I have been talking about, can Bijan rush for 1,500 yards this season? That would be a huge workload that a lot of guys would have to assist with filling that void. But unless that happens, I think Brooks I think there could only be modest expectations for me that he could be a guy that impacts the team in a 1-loss record kind of way. If we move along to the wide receiver position, a couple of interesting guys. We've talked a lot about Xavier Worthy. He's a kid out of Fresno, California, number 66 in the nation a year ago, one of the top 5 players in California last year, top 10-ish wide receiver in the country. And then a guy that doesn't get a lot of discussion necessarily, Keithron Lee from Bryan, Texas. Excuse me, not from Tyler. And a 3-star guy, signed on late in the class. He is a Sarkisian guy. And then you've also got Casey Kane, a wide receiver out of New Orleans, another 3-star player, and a guy that really more than any – Casey Kane at 6'3", 185 absolutely fits the Tom Herman profile of a prospect and receiver. It almost makes it so that Onward he doesn't stand out to me. Mm-hmm. But both Keithron Lee and especially Xavier Worthy, these are dudes that play like they're somewhat shot out of a gun, especially Xavier Worthy, a guy that's got 10.5, 100-meter speed. I think Worthy, he might be number 1 for me, even over Jatavian Sanders, because I think he's a guy, his skill set is different. At 6'1", 160, you've heard the name Devontae Smith thrown around. If he could be that kind of player or fill that kind of role in a Steve Sarkisian offense, I don't think Texas – you and I both like Jordan Whittington. We both like Jake. We like guys we like Joshua Moore. Like, there are guys on this roster at receiver that we like, but none of them are guys that you throw a hitch and can watch him go 70 because he's that electrifying. That's not who these guys are. Of the three guys that I mentioned, Worthy for me is the only guy that I think really can come in and make a first year dent, but I think he might make a big first year dent.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, Sarkisian wants playmakers, right? I mean, he wants guys that can take it to the house. I mean, one of the things that he talked about recently, and I think this was in Houston, was he wants guys when they're generating their offense, just a couple of chunks here, couple of chunks here, but he wants almost quick strike. Like I remember him saying something like that. He wants quick strike type of offenses. He doesn't necessarily want the methodical getting down the field type of thing. He wants guys who can make plays. And so when we look at the current guys that we had in the spring, because you didn't see a lot of those guys that you thought that guy takes it to the house. You saw guys who can catch the ball. You saw some guys who were possession receivers, but you didn't see guys that you thought, okay, this person has wiggle. Like this guy's going to make a couple of people miss. Hollywood Brown, a good example. Like that kind of guy that we saw on the college level, make guys miss and then take it to the house. You didn't necessarily see something like that. In this guy, when you talk about Xavier Worthy, he's got that kind of wiggle. He's got that kind of speed. He's got, I think, what Sarkisian would really, really love. And again, it's not to throw shade at any of those other guys. Jake Smith is a really good receiver. All the other guys that you mentioned are good receivers. But when we start talking about playmaking, the equalizer, one plays like a guy like Xavier Worthy, if Andre Coleman can get him up to speed in a very short period of time, he's a guy that can come in and kind of have that impact that you're talking about.
Going to the tight end position. Hello, Jatavian Sanders.
That's our guy. At least not my guy, at least.
I mean, look, he better be he's a 5-star. He was the number 13 ranked player in the country. He is the crown jewel of the 2021 recruiting class.
Yes.
He could play defense. I think ultimately it's going to be over Steve Sarkisian's dead body that Sanders be allowed. I think he'll get a look on defense because I don't think they ever want to leave that stone completely uncovered. And in a world where he could be an immediate pass rusher, maybe he gets on the field that way. But the thing is, he's kind of a project on the defensive side of the ball. He's mostly been at his best an offensive player. He's a highlight reel waiting to happen on that side of the ball. I think needs a little bit more coaching and a little bit more development maybe before he's an impact player on defense, although he absolutely could be. But I think the fact that he could be an impact guy on offense almost immediately at a position that's deep with good players, but doesn't have a great one. And also, I don't know that they have a very good one either. You and I talk about Jared Wily being a guy that can be that guy, but I don't know that a single player emerged from the spring as watch out, this guy, just based on what has happened in the last month, has taken this step and is now ready to put his foot on the gas. Not seeing that. And if Jatavian, every tight end on that roster is done having an advantage over Sanders. They've had time. They have a 6-7 month head start in terms of the playbook and all that other kind of stuff. But he brings a talent that none of those dudes have. Not Jared Wily and certainly not anybody else. I mean, I don't know how to quantify it with stats, but that dude, I think, is going to play on offense. And I don't care that they're 5 deep. I think some dudes are about to fall behind on the depth chart, and there's not anything they can do about it because this dude has special talent, and rarely does that arrive at the tight end position in a way that Sanders can bring it.
You know what's so funny? You were so into thought that you totally missed my 3-year-old walking into the screen with his Paw Patrol shirt on, and
was it red?
It's just, it mixed up the green, but in any case, he just went to grab his M&Ms. I'm on daddy duty as I do this. Jatavian Sanders, though, I did comprehend all that. Jatavian, I mean, he's stud. I mean, he's bona fide stud. And I think the biggest thing is for him, especially as you look at UT wanting to run 12 personnel, is can he pick up the blocking? Can he be a guy that they can put out there on different downs and it won't be obvious that he's just there for pass catching, right? If he's a guy that they could put out there on first down, second down, third down, and they won't get the quarterback killed, because that's the thing he cannot afford. There ain't a whole lot of depth. And again, depending on who wins that quarterback battle, if Casey Thompson loses, he's leaving. So whatever the case may be, if there's no depth there, the last thing you can afford is to have a tight end out there who don't know what he's doing as far as pass blocking is concerned. But we know he's a stud. And we know what we saw in high school, and we know how that should translate, because he was so dominant. Like I love to see guys who are that dominant in high school, because if he's right up here and everyone else is right here, that means by the time he gets to college, he might be right here, might be right here. And it's just going to be little things that actually end up making a difference. But it's funny, someone contacted me the other day, about a couple of weeks ago, private messaged me on Twitter, and we had a conversation about Jatavian, and he couldn't understand why I didn't necessarily think that Jatavian Sanders would get 1,000 yards as a freshman. And we started having this, this back and forth conversation and battle of really what it was. And look, there hasn't been really 1,000-yard tight end on Sark's resume. It just isn't. And it doesn't mean he doesn't value it, but 1,000 yards asking for a freshman is kind of a lot, right? we would absolutely agree. The best tight end in the Big 12 is from Iowa State, and that guy didn't have 1,000 yards.
I don't think Texas has ever had a 1,000-yard receiver ever.
Tight end, you mean?
I mean, yeah, tight end.
Yeah, I mean, he's like you're selling him short. It's like not selling him short, but let's place real expectations on what the position really is, especially under Sark. That haven't seen that. Jeff Banks hasn't really produced that kind of tight end. But first of all, if you are Jeff Banks, you got a whole lot of toys to work with. That's for damn sure. Not only from a tight end position, from a special teams position. All right, so enough of Jatavian. I think he's a bona fide stud. It's just a matter of can he do some pass blocking and get into the mix.
I think that we're going to see a situation with Jatavian that in the first week of practice, he'll snatch a ball over the head of a linebacker with one hand, the way that he did at Denton Ryan. And I think Sark is going to say, yeah, to hell with blocking. That guy will be on the field in certain situations and packages where it doesn't matter if he can block or not, which may mean that they really think of him as a first-year receiver, of an H-back type guy who's involved in 12 personnel where you're just trying to get your big guy in a matchup with some. The thing that makes Sanders really enticing is that you can't really put a linebacker or he's too big to match up with a safety, and he's too quick and agile. I mean, this is what you want out of your position, is a guy at that position that defenses can't cover up with one guy. That's like, oh, our nickel guy's got him, and our guy will win that battle. But Sanders is such a unique talent that he's going to be a matchup nightmare. And I think that one element of his skill set, I think will transcend what normally, and you know what, you may be right when it's all said and done. Like he may get a quarterback killed at some point, and it would be like, that's why he's not playing.
Mm-hmm.
But it also might be that we don't see him on the end of the line very often. That, when he's getting, let's say, 25 snaps a game, he's just not in a position. He's not being used in a way that I think that comes into focus. But yes, if we're talking about traditional tight end play and Texas isn't playing 12 personnel, they're playing a one tight end system, and that guy a lot of times is going to be at the end of the line, he'll have a hard time, I think, cracking that 5 tight end lineup. I just think his receiving skills, he's just one of the few guys on this team that Sarkisian can go to his house at night with and be like, yeah, no, I want to stay up and think of ways to get him the ball. And I think Xavier Worthy is a guy like that. But, we talk about Bijan, we talk about Jordan Whittington and guys like that. He is, for me, the only guy at the tight end position that you would do that with. Nobody else. Would he go home after work and before he puts his head on a pillow, think about how he's going to get that guy involved this week? It's a unique skill set, but we can move along. And by the way, I think this video may turn into an offensive video. We may have to do a part 2 that focuses on defensive guys.
By the way, Cass, one question though, before we just go to time, within 45 seconds, you remember last season, I think when Herman called, it was like a fake punt, and he threw the pass to Cade Brewer, and Cade Brewer ended up being like, 3-4 yards short, something crazy to that effect. Do you think and you're thinking it the whole time, why'd you not put Wily in for that situation? Do you think Sark, given what the tools that he has now, goes with Wily or Sanders on a play like that as opposed to Brewer? Or do you think Brewer still's got a lock on that position?
I just don't know if we saw anything in the spring that makes me think Wiley's taken the job. And you and I think McComas and, I feel like it really, and Alex, pretty much the entire Orange Blood staff, we've been waiting for the Jared Wiley takeoff. I wonder, and this is no slam on Jared Wiley, because that guy may still play in the NFL, but I wonder if he missed his moment. It's hard for me not to see Ja'Tavion Sanders show up and not think, because what we've thought about Wily is he's the most talented of the tight end guys. He's not anymore. And the light switch better go off soon for him, or he'll forever, I think, be behind Ja'Tavion Sanders, who's just a more talented physical prospect.
Okay, well, then if that's the case, then transfer portal watch.
I mean, this is not show friends, it's show business. And up until now, Jared Wiley has not been a marquee guy in the show business side of things. And the bar at the tight end position is rising. And I think that's good. And I think, Braden Liebrock is a guy that could push guys for playing time. That's a guy that he's been a good player when he's been healthy, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy. And they started to get him on the field at various times last season, and then he'd get hurt and then be set back. And he just forever has been in this 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I think the thing that Sanders does with his arrival, those dudes know they can't mess around. Same thing that happened at the running back position a year ago. If you didn't separate yourself before Bijan showed up, it probably won't ever happen. And that's what happened. I mean, Bijan rose to the cream of the crop because he is the cream of the crop. And, Xavier Worthy, another guy. If you aren't making yourself seen and known by August, you run the risk of that dude showing up in August, showing out, and then now you're just trying to get to the second spot on the depth chart because one is blocked with the guy that started doing things before you did that took too much time for you to do. So
the only thing I'll add into that before we move on to that, just, to put it on the, Jared Wiley bubble watch, the 2 tight ends that the young tight ends that Sarkisian praised during the spring were Juan Davis and Gunnar Helm. Those are the names that we heard, a little bit more often. So to your point, as far as Jared Wiley, do or die, this might be it, because now you got Ja'Tavion coming on campus. Yeah, you might have a point there.
And I think Jeff Banks has a tight end room that's as good at Texas as what he had at Alabama. He has an older senior guy that he can depend on for some grunt work. He's got, I think, without even getting into Ja'Tavion Sanders, he's got an NFL kind of talent in Jared Wiley. He's got another guy that was a national top 50 guy in Liebrock that just can't stay healthy. And then we're talking about all these young guys. I mean, the tight end room is as stacked and talented from top to bottom as probably any position on campus. And so, yeah, You better start doing it now, or they'll look to a younger guy to see if they can find somebody that can do that thing. Real quickly on the offensive lineman, there's only one who's arriving. 3-star offensive lineman Mike Merrill comes from straight Jesuit in Houston. You know, his rivals.
Max Merrill.
I'm sorry, what did I say, Mike? Yeah, yes. Max Merrill. Is there a Mike Merrill that I got him confused with? Too many names in my head. Max Merrill comes in from straight Jesuit. Listed at 6'5", 280, might be bigger than that. My whole thought on the offensive line right now is if they don't think that anybody in the portal can help this group, then they must be good. And Max Merrill's headed for a red shirt, barring something completely unforeseen.
Yeah, I mean, you know, those guys take some time to develop. And yeah, you know, that's just a few years from now, we'll know what it is. But, you know, everything about him is going to be about strength and conditioning, getting bigger, you know, faster, stronger, and going from there. But hold on, before we cut the conversation short, before you go, I know that we're talking about guys who just arrived, but I'd like to just throw a monkey wrench in here. If we do this every year, we'll never talk about the quarterback because the quarterback, there's no way in today's football a real quarterback is showing up in June. Like it just doesn't happen, right? So
unless you're getting a transfer.
But outside of that, you know, one of the things that always shocked me was about Gerard Hurd was that Gerard Hurd showed up in like the summertime. And I'm like, wow, that's usually unique. Most people show up in January. So just real quick on Charles Wright, before we get out of here, any thoughts on him?
I mean, there's a world where he's the backup quarterback this season. I don't know that happens, but the Casey Thompson, Hudson Card battle, I don't know how that completely turns out. Like, I think I know how it will, but I don't know. I only think. And because there's not a known variable there, you know, I think that Charles Wright is not ready to play at this level. He needs to go and sit in the oven at 375 for maybe a season or two. But he could be the backup in 3 months. And which means he's one play away from being the starting quarterback. So I don't know that there's a big conversation that we can have about Charles Wright, but he is low key. He's the don't break in case of emergency option. And it's not the wildest idea to think that he could play as a true freshman. It would mean really bad things. It would mean that either one or two guys got hurt, or one got hurt and one transferred. But, you know, we talk about Jonathan Brooks. I mean, when we start talking about, well, if Bijan were to get hurt, what would they do? There's a world where Texas has a quarterback injury and he suddenly becomes a very important figurehead in this program. And the failure at the quarterback recruitment position under Tom Herman in last year's class, with the one that's showing up on campus right now, you know, they weren't able to get a big time guy. They signed a guy from locally with a very low profile, and there are sometimes consequences for that. And, you know, it probably won't happen, but you brought it up for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, it just, you know, in the world that he's the backup quarterback ends up being the world where Hudson Card is the number one guy and Casey Thompson hits the portal and that's your number two. And, you know, in this position, quarterbacks, I mean, it doesn't take much to get a ding of some sorts. And, or someone needs to go in for a series or two. So the Charles Wright thing is fascinating because, to your point, he comes from a high school which I don't know for sure. You know, there's someone who follows Austin High probably better than me. Not quite sure if they posted a winning season with him. I feel like there was some 5-5s there. Maybe there was a 6-4 in there. And he's a player. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, he was a player. He was that entire team. I don't know what they do without him, to be quite honest with you, because he's that good. I have a friend of mine whose son, plays, is a quarterback locally. So I've been able to follow guys and go show up at camps and this and that because he's a good friend of mine. So supporting his son, I've been able to see a lot of guys. He can ball, but the problem is he's played it for, a program that, and that's your alma mater, right? Austin High?
I'm a McCallum boy.
McCallum. Okay, that didn't mean to be insulting.
It was very insulting. Thank you.
Okay, my bad. Listen, I'm from Florida. I went to Lakeland High School. If you said I was from Kathleen, I would be totally upset about that too. So I get it. I get it. Even though Ray Lewis went to Kathleen High School. And so, yeah, I totally get what you're saying as far as that is concerned. So yeah, with the Charles Wright, we'll see what happens, but he's a guy that, you're just hoping, like you said, he sits and learns for a couple of years. He sits there, and then Malik Murphy gets on campus. He needs to sit and learn for a couple of years. I mean, they realistically potentially may only have, Hudson Card could be the guy for a couple of years if he wins the job. Because there may not be another quarterback ready to challenge him for multiple years when you really think about it, if he wins the job. I think Casey Thomas is going to win the job, so that's totally different. And that's a different conversation, a different argument for another day. But I just wanted to throw out the Charles Wright thing before we got off this show.
We did not talk about Anwar's favorite player, Devin Richardson.
We'll get to it next time.
Yes, it's the ultimate tease on our YouTube channel is to say a name in the beginning of a video and then to just never go back.
Talk about him again.
Until the end, when we promise, like Lucy with the football, that we will do it then. But no, seriously, we'll do a video again in the next 24 hours, and we'll focus on the defensive side of the ball, where you've got 3 linebacker transfers coming in and a handful of defensive guys on the high school level that I think there's a couple of guys in there that could be impact players that nobody's talking about. That's also called a tease. So for myself and Anwar Richardson, if you'd like this video, hit the like button. Do not hold it against us that we spent so much time talking about the offensive guys that we didn't get to the defensive guys, which may be its own 30 to 45 minute show when it's all said and done. So look, for both of us, thank you for watching. We would appreciate that whole like if you want to go down there and do that. It's just right down there. Until next time. Thanks for watching. Later.